Let's try a little thought experiment. We're going to go on a journey, but not out into the world. We're going deep inside the mind, and I mean really deep. We're going to strip away all the usual stuff, the thoughts, the to-do lists, all the noise from the outside world, and we're going to ask a really simple but really big question. What's left? What is awareness itself when there's nothing to be aware of?
I mean, think about it. What is consciousness when all the data from your senses, your sight, your hearing, your touch, is gone? When that inner voice finally goes quiet, is it just nothing? A black void? Or is there something else there? Something fundamental? That is exactly what we're here to explore.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we need to define what consciousness without content even is. Then we'll get into how people actually get to this state. After that, we hit the big one. Why would you even want to? And that's going to lead us to this idea of craving. And finally, we'll see how this whole journey can completely change the story you tell yourself about, well, you. All right, first things first. Before we can talk about how to get there or why it even matters, we've got to get on the same page about what there is. So let's get a really clear definition of what we're talking about. Okay, so researchers have a name for this, minimal phenomenal experience, or MPE. You'll also hear it called pure consciousness. And here is the absolute key. This is not about being unconscious or experiencing some empty nothingness. MPE is the experience of awareness itself. It's the simple, pure fact of being aware, even when all the thoughts and sensations have just faded away.
So, what's it actually like? Well, people who've experienced it describe it in some really specific ways. They say it's totally unstructured and about as simple as an experience can get. And, this is huge, it's selfless. That feeling of I or me just dissolves. There's no point of view, no zero perspective. It doesn't have qualities like color or sound. It's often described as a fundamental state of just being. A state of just is.
Okay, so if this state is real, the next logical question is, how do you get there? I mean, how can you access an experience that's literally defined by the absence of everything you normally experience?
Well, it turns out there are a couple of major pathways. And they look very different on the surface, but they can lead to a surprisingly similar place. On one hand, you've got meditation, that ancient, disciplined practice of training the mind. On the other, you have psychedelics, which can, trigger these massive, rapid shifts in consciousness. But what's absolutely fascinating is that researchers are finding that the destination, that state of MPE, can be practically identical. The raw experience, they say, can have no substantial phenomenological difference.
And this brings us to a really important question. Why? Why would anyone actively try to experience a state that sounds like nothing? An experience without thoughts, without senses, without even a self? Well, the motivation is tied to something we all know very, very well: suffering. And the engine that drives it? Craving.
Let's look to one of the world's oldest traditions for a clue. In the Buddhist scriptures, the state of nirvana isn't described as some kind of magical, heavenly place. It's described, as you see here, as the complete fading and cessation of craving. It's all about letting go of that constant wanting, that constant itch for things to be different than they are.
You see, in Buddhist practice, this state of pure consciousness is actually called a pleasant abiding. The whole idea is that by touching this fundamental ground of awareness, you can find a genuine release from that endless loop of wanting something, getting it, and then wanting something else. The very cycle that Buddhist thought says is the root of our dissatisfaction.
And you know what? This isn't just ancient philosophy anymore. Modern science is right there exploring the same ideas, just with different tools. Neuroscientists can now literally map the brain networks that are involved in things like addiction, craving, and all of our self-centered thinking. They're finding that the ancient goal of letting go of craving might actually have a physical correlate in the brain, a way to disrupt the very circuits that keep us stuck.
Two networks are really key here. First, there's the default mode network, the DMN. You can think of it as the brain's me network. It lights up whenever we're daydreaming, thinking about ourselves, ruminating on the past, or planning the future. Then you have the salience network, which helps us switch our attention between our own thoughts and what's happening in the world around us. And it's probably no surprise that figuring out how to quiet down these self-obsessed networks is a huge area of research for treating things like addiction.
So, we've looked at what pure consciousness is, how you might get there, and why someone would even want to. And this all leads us to one final, truly mind-bending place, a fundamental questioning of who you think you are.
There's this fantastic concept from the philosopher Thomas Metzinger called the narrative self-model. The basic idea is that you have a little storyteller running inside your head 24/7.
It takes all the raw, chaotic, and frankly meaningless events of your life and it weaves them into a neat and tidy story. The story of me. And that story is what gives you a feeling of being a stable person over time.
But here's the twist. That inner storyteller, it's not always telling the truth. As Metzinger puts it, we have this deep-rooted need for narrative self-deception. In other words, we edit the story. We gloss over the messy parts, the contradictions, the ugly details, so that we can create a heroic, optimistic inner story about ourselves. It's basically a coping mechanism.
And that is what makes the experience of pure consciousness so powerful. For just a moment, that inner storyteller goes quiet. The narrative stops running. It's like you get a quick peek behind the curtain of the story you've been telling yourself your entire life, and you get to experience the awareness that exists completely apart from it.
Which leaves us with one final thought to really chew on. If that sense of you that you walk around with every single day is, at its core, just a story, then who or what is the one writing it?